If there's one thing that I've learnt in my 17 years of living on this planet, it's definitely this. Godzilla's fucking awesome.
No dick, no balls, and probably no butthole since this guy feeds on radiation.
I've been a Godzilla fan since I was a wee little lad. I watched the 2014 movie when I was, I say about 7, and I instantly just fell in love with the franchise. I eventually started watching the original Toho movies, starting with the original 1962 King Kong vs. Godzilla. I would spend hours looking into the lore and the history of the whole franchise. I began collecting, and I still do to this day. The dismay of my bank account. I watched every MonsterVerse movie in cinemas, well, except from GVK because, well, you know, the world ended. By the way, I'm gonna do a ultimate retrospective on the MonsterVerse very soon. The next video will probably be a review on Godzilla 2014, so stay tuned for that. However, this video isn't about that, it's about the upcoming movie in this franchise that has been going on for 70 years. That is insane. I'm talking about Godzilla x Kong Supernova. As we know, Godzilla x Kong Supernova is coming out in 2027, 2 years away. I don't know if I'm going to be able to wait for long, but a teaser came out about, I'd say, 2 months ago now. And I know I'm late, but okay, cut me slack, okay? These videos take a long time to make. To say I'm excited would be an understatement. This is easily my most anticipated movie of 2027. That's right, even more than Beyond the Spider-Verse, Secret Wars, The Batman Part 2, well, if it doesn't get delayed again. So far, we don't actually know much about the film, so I decided to make a video basically pitching my ideas for what I would do with Supernova, what I think the plot should be, who the villain should be, and all the other titans that should be in the film. So yeah, let's get into it. The first thing I think they should do with this film is what I've been saying and a lot of other people have been saying for a very long time at this point. Make the film Godzilla focused. As most people know, the past 2 films have been very heavily Kong focused. It does definitely feel like Kong has been getting a lot more of the spotlight recently, since, you know, he has been the focus of GVK and GXK, and also recently had his own survival game that came out a few months ago. I haven't played it yet, but I do want to eventually. I can understand why Kong's been the focus of the past 2 films, because, well, he is an ape, so he's definitely more relatable and can emit emotion more than Godzilla, because, well, let's be honest, he's just a giant fucking lizard. Lizards don't really emote. But still, you can still make Godzilla relatable and have him have character. We have seen it a few times in the MonsterVerse with his facial expressions where you can clearly tell what he's thinking, especially in King of the Monsters. But also in the Heisei movies where they literally made Godzilla go through character development. They made him start off as a destructive force of nature and then ended him as a father trying to protect his child. That's what I think they should do with this film. Give Godzilla more character development and let us know more about him, since, let's be honest, we really don't know a lot about MonsterVerse Godzilla. We know about the ancient rivalries he's had in the past with other titans like Geedorah and Scar King, but besides from that, we really don't know anything about his character and his backstory. Unlike Kong, where we literally know about his past because of the Birth of Kong comic and a bunch of other stuff in the films, since he literally went on an arc for the past 3 films he's been in finding a family and to not be alone anymore. I think Godzilla should go through a similar arc, but obviously different as well. I think one of those ideas could maybe be you could introduce Godzilla Jr., which I don't know about that yet. I feel like they should save Junior for maybe the next film, since we already just had Zuko in GXK, so would it be a bit repetitive to give Godzilla a son yet? I don't know. Thing is that I really want is I just want to see a more, I don't know if I'd say human side to Godzilla, but more of an emotional side of him, because let's be honest, we've really only see him be a massive, violent, killing machine brute for the past films. So I feel like this film, we should see more of, well, his personality and just him as a character as a whole. You could maybe do this by making the villain connect to his past, but I'm gonna be honest, I'm getting sick of the whole ancient rivalry shit. It feels like in every single film in the Monsterverse, Godzilla has an ancient rival. They did it with Geedorah, Kong, Scar King, and I guess kind of Shimo as well, will they imply it. They've basically just completely butchered that title. I want the next villain to be a monster that Godzilla hasn't faced yet. I don't know, I just feel like it would be more compelling for the villain to be a titan that Godzilla hasn't seen before, because he'll make it more of a challenging fight, if that makes sense. I'll talk more about that when I talk about who the villain's gonna be for the film. Another thing that I hope they do is that they change the design of Godzilla. I actually really like the Godzilla Revolve design, but I do have a few problems with it. I do hope the film changes. One, I don't like how skinny he is, I like my Godzilla's thick. I also don't like how they made his head smaller as well, but it's mainly the chest that I don't like. I just don't like when Godzilla's skinny. But besides from that, I actually really like Godzilla's design. I like the pink spikes and I like how he's more spiky. But I do definitely think that there is still room for improvements. I don't think they should change the design drastically. I think a cool idea is maybe having him be based off the Kiryu Saga Goji. So instead you could maybe make his spines white instead of pink. Maybe give him back his blue atomic breath, or a white atomic breath would be cool. Something similar to the Gemstone Godzilla. If it was up to me, I would go with a Kiryu Saga Goji design, because that is definitely one of my favourite Godzilla designs out there. Another thing I'd want to fix is Godzilla's personality. In 2014 and King of the Monsters, Godzilla had quite this noble warrior, last samurai-like personality. I'm pretty sure that's how Gareth Edwards described Godzilla in an interview, I'm pretty sure. I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong. Anyway, like I was saying, so Godzilla in the first two films was predicted as like this noble samurai-like warrior who was all about protecting nature's balance and was overall a guardian of the planet. Then just for Adam Wingard to turn this noble keeper of balance into just a massive dick. That's no hate to Adam Wingard, by the way. I do actually like his depiction of Godzilla, but I do prefer the more earlier kind of depictions of him. Like in Godzilla vs. Kong and Godzilla x Kong, Kong literally goes through an entire character arc in both films, while Godzilla is just an angry dickhead who just wants to fucking kill Kong. Which is cool and all, but it just kind of feels out of character for Godzilla when you think about the earlier entries of the Monsterverse. So I just hope that this movie can just make him more like that noble warrior again. Another thing I want to talk about is how a lot of people have been saying in this film to make Godzilla the villain, or at least just the antagonist of the film. And I'm not gonna lie, I completely disagree. I don't think they should make Godzilla the villain, because we already had Godzilla -1 where Godzilla is the bad guy, so I feel like the Monsterverse should do their own thing and not make Godzilla like necessarily a full-on hero, but make him like an anti-hero, like Heisei Godzilla. That's just how I imagine Legendary Godzilla, at least. So the main things I want for Godzilla in this movie is for him to be the main focus of the movie and just overall more centric to the story. An improved design. If you want, you can keep the evolved design, but just make him more bulky and, maybe change the colour of his spikes. One more thing I forgot to mention, please bring back the original Akube Godzilla theme. Please. Now it's time to talk about who the villain's going to be of the film. I'm pretty sure the main topic of discussion with GXK Supernova is who the villain's going to be. I've heard a lot of people say that Destroyah should be the main villain. I know I'm not the only person who says this, but I think we can all agree that it is way too early to introduce Destroyah. I do think Destroyah should definitely be the Thanos of the Monsterverse, and what I mean by that is have him be the villain of the final movie. I do think they should definitely tease him in this film and tease him all the way throughout the rest of the Monsterverse, kind of like what the MCU did with Thanos. I just think there's so many more villains that they can do before they do Destroyah. Another kaiju I've been hearing people say should be the villain is Gigan! And to that I say, hell yeah! I am a professional Gigan glazer. Gigan is fucking awesome and I need my go in the Monsterverse. It does actually seem like quite a few people think Gigan will be in the film. I think my main question is, if they're going to add Gigan into the Monsterverse, what's his origin gonna be? They could maybe have Gigan start off as a Titan on Earth, then he could maybe fight Godzilla at the start of the film, then obviously get his ass handed to him. So then the humans, if that's Apex or another dickhead corporation, can then rebuild him as a cyborg. And then that's how we get the Gigan we all know and love. And then the other option is obviously the space route, which I do think is more likely due to the film seems very space themed. I think if they go this route, not only would it be better, I think, but also it would be a perfect way to introduce aliens to the Monsterverse. I know aliens might seem a bit unrealistic to some people. Let's be honest, GXK basically just took realism out the fucking window at this point, so I feel like aliens wouldn't be that far of a stretch at this point. And I mean, this isn't the first time we've had aliens in the Monsterverse. King Ghidorah was literally from outer space, so you never know, there could be more extraterrestrial threats out there. If they do Gigan in this film, I need him to be ruthless as fuck. He needs to be probably the most sadistic monster that Godzilla's ever fought in the Monsterverse. I mean, after all, Gigan was the first monster to make Godzilla bleed in the Showa era, so making him that vicious and that ruthless would be absolute cinema. Design wise, I don't know how they do the design. If it was up to me, I would make him look like Final Wars Gigan, since, well, that's my favourite Gigan design. But if they go with the more classical Showa design, I wouldn't mind that either. I love that design too. As for evidence, there's literally no real evidence that Gigan's going to appear in the film. A lot of people do think that the light scene on the teaser trailer is supposed to be Gigan's like eye or visor, but I don't know. I think that's just overanalyzing it if you ask me.
See? You see? Well, you don't see it? He moves! Right there! Wait! Right there! Coincidence? I think not!
I think the monster who I'm going to talk about now is way more likely to be the villain. And that kaiju is SpaceGodzilla. Let's be honest, I'm pretty sure most people think that SpaceGodzilla is going to be in the film. And I do think there are definitely a lot of evidence suggesting that he is going to be in the film. Because if you look at the teaser trailer for GXK Supernova, there's actually a code that you can translate which translates to SpaceGodzilla. And I think the evidence that makes me convinced the most that SpaceGodzilla is going to be in it is one of the actors for the film, Matthew Modine. If you don't know him, he's from Stranger Things. He posted a lot of shit on his Instagram that basically kind of confirms that SpaceGodzilla is going to be in the film. However, there is always the possibility that this could be a troll to misdirect us from who the actual villain is. But I do think SpaceGodzilla is very likely because of this. I think this film could give SpaceGodzilla a very big chance to shine and become one of the big heavy hitters of the franchise. However, the problem is how are they even going to have SpaceGodzilla in the Monsterverse? Because I think the origins for SpaceGodzilla in the Heisei movies just cannot really be done in the Monsterverse right now. If you did not know, in the Heisei movies, SpaceGodzilla was created by pieces of Godzilla's cells that went up into space after Biollante was killed. Then they eventually was sucked into a black hole, and then, you know, bunch of space shenanigans happen, and then that turns into SpaceGodzilla. I know that might have not been the greatest explanation ever, but I don't know, search it up. So obviously I don't think SpaceGodzilla's origin in the Heisei movies can work in the Monsterverse. Because 1, Biollante hasn't appeared in the Monsterverse yet, and 2, there's no real way Godzilla cells can be in space. But just because SpaceGodzilla's origin in the Heisei films can't work in the Monsterverse, I mean, obviously that doesn't mean they can't just not make a new origin for him. Because for all we know, SpaceGodzilla might already be in the Monsterverse. In a deleted scene of Godzilla vs. Kong, there is a cave painting of a flying Godzilla, and a lot of people think that is SpaceGodzilla. It does actually make an appearance in the novelization for GVK. They named it Zozilla Halawa, which actually means great enemy in Iwi language. So far we don't know anything about Zozilla Halawa, but a lot of people think it is supposed to be SpaceGodzilla. I don't know, perhaps maybe it was an ancient Godzilla in ancient time that got corrupted by some Hollow Earth power or something. That could be true, but yet again, that also does mean that SpaceGodzilla will be another ancient rival to Godzilla, which, like I said before, I'm just getting tired of the whole ancient rivalry thing. I just think it would be better if SpaceGodzilla is a monster that Godzilla's never fought before, and we're gonna have to see Godzilla actually learn to defeat SpaceGodzilla. My idea for SpaceGodzilla's origin in the Monsterverse is to have him be very similar to the unused Godzilla vs. Berserk film from the 90s. Have SpaceGodzilla start off as a new alien legendary kaiju who comes to Earth. Which motive I would have be to absorb the DNA of the most powerful apex predator on the planet, obviously that being Godzilla. You could have the first fight be this pre-Space Godzilla form. You could have Godzilla defeat him, but then he absorbs Godzilla's DNA and turns into Space Godzilla and just whoops Godzilla's ass. Just have Space Godzilla beat the shit out of Godzilla to the point where Godzilla needs help, as I think doing that would just show how big of a threat SpaceGodzilla is. Now, the final potential villain that I'm going to be talking about is very unlikely, but it's definitely the kaiju I want to be the villain the most, at least, besides from Gigan. And that kaiju is King Ghidorah. King Ghidorah is probably Godzilla's most iconic enemy. He's literally Godzilla's arch nemesis, pretty much the Joker to Godzilla's Batman. Since in almost every single Godzilla continuity there is, he has fought Ghidorah. As we know, Ghidorah was the main villain in Godzilla King of the Monsters, but I feel like Ghidorah is that big of a villain, he can't just be your average one-off villain. And I know again, he did technically kind of come back in Godzilla vs. Kong as Mechagodzilla. Well, his spirit is controlling Mechagodzilla. It's a whole can of worms. I understand Ghidorah is dead, but I do think there are ways that you can bring him back. The first option you can go with, which is probably what most people are thinking of, is Mecha King Ghidorah. But the question is, what form is Mecha King Ghidorah going to take? Is he going to be a cyborg like he is in the Heisei movies, or is he just going to be a full-on mech like Mechagodzilla? Personally, I think a cool idea is to do both. Walk with me. So have Mecha King Ghidorah just start off as a full-on mech, and let's just say they implement Ghidorah's brain inside of the mech, so then it can think on its own just like Mechagodzilla. So while that's happening, you can have signs that something is clearly going wrong inside of the mech. Perhaps it's constantly glitching, or there's parts of the mech that are falling off. Then finally in the final battle, we can have Ghidorah burst from the sides of the mech in kind of like a body horror like scene, and then that's how we get the cyborg Mecha Ghidorah, by implementing parts of the mech into its body. Another idea I have comes from the novelization from Godzilla King of the Monsters, and that idea is a theory in the book that says that Ghidorah is actually a younger member of his species that came to Earth to claim new territory, meaning that there are other Ghidorahs out there who are bigger, scarier and wiser than the Ghidorah that we have. I think this is a perfect way to introduce Kaiser Ghidorah into the Monsterverse. Kaiser Ghidorah is a kick-ass kaiju, which, to be fair, doesn't really get a lot of respect. So having Kaiser Ghidorah as almost like the emperor of Ghidorah's species, since obviously Kaiser is Dutch for emperor, would be a fucking awesome twist, which he would obviously be so much of a formidable threat for Godzilla, he would have to get help from Kong and other titans. It could also be cool if, say, Kaiser Ghidorah has an army of other Ghidorahs with him, just a full-on invasion of Earth with Ghidorahs, but to be fair, maybe we're reaching it a little bit with that one. Anyway, that's my idea on who the villains should be in Supernova. Now, I'm going to talk about the side kaijus, if you want to call it that. Basically, other titans that I want in the film who aren't the main villain, or allies to Godzilla, whatever. Anyway, let's get into it. Okay, I'm gonna start with the side kaiju slash allies who I think are the most likely to be in the film. First of all, I'm very certain that Mothra's gonna be in the film in some capacity at least. Since obviously she survived the New Empire and she's still in the Hollow Earth, I do think that definitely obviously leaves the door open for Mothra to return again. I really hope she does, and I hope she gets a lot more screen time, because one of my main criticisms of the New Empire is how Mothra just kind of appears at the end of the film, and that's about it. You know, it just kind of feels like she was just put in the film last minute, because she was. But yeah, I do definitely think Mothra's going to be in the film, 100%. And I do think Zuko is definitely also going to be in the film as well, along with the other great apes. I don't really know what they could really do in the film, to be honest. I think it would be cool though if they age Zuko up to maybe make him like a juvenile or a teenager. Make him look similar to how Kong looked in Skull Island. Another titan who I think is at least likely to return in some capacity is Shimo. I absolutely fucking love Shimo. Shimo is probably my favourite legendary original titan. I love the design, I love the ice powers. It very much reminds me of the Bewilderbeast from How to Train Your Dragon, which is probably my favourite dragon in that franchise. But yeah, Shimo's fucking awesome, bro. Now I'm going to talk about kaijus who I really hope are going to be in the film, and are maybe likely to be in the film, but obviously not as likely as the kaiju I just mentioned. The first ally to Godzilla who I really fucking hope is going to be in the film is Anguirus. Anguirus is literally Godzilla's best friend. He is literally the Robin to Godzilla's Batman. Obviously, Anguirus isn't the strongest kaiju ever. He's usually always just getting his ass kicked in the original Showa movies. But, you know, he's still a loyal ally to Godzilla and is probably one of the most likable kaijus in the entire Godzilla franchise. So, yeah, please, Legendary, please give us Anguirus. Please, I'll do anything. Please! Please! Another kaiju, well, this isn't really a kaiju, but another ally that I want to be in the film is definitely Jet Jaguar. Particularly, I want to see Trapper pilot Jet Jaguar. I know that's been said to death, but come on, you gotta admit that idea is fucking awesome. With Trapper's personality and the 80s soundtrack from Godzilla x Kong, have that with Jet Jaguar would just be peak cinema. Obviously, Jet Jaguar isn't the most recognisable character from the Godzilla franchise, but I mean, to be fair, it does seem like we're kind of running out of recognisable kaijus to be in the Monsterverse. We've already done the big five with Ghidorah, Mothra, Rodan and Mechagodzilla, so I do think we should definitely get into the more, you know, obscure characters not a lot of people know about. Another ally I'd love to see is definitely King Caesar. King Caesar is such an underrated kaiju. I do think King Caesar fits the Monsterverse perfectly, because as we know, in King of the Monsters, we see ancient civilizations essentially worship the Titans as gods. And that's pretty similar to King Caesar's origin in the Showa films, so I do think King Caesar could definitely work. Or you could just make him a creature from the Hollow Earth, maybe. This next idea might be a bit divisive to some people, but I do think we should bring back Mechagodzilla, but not as an enemy to Godzilla, but an ally. Have this Mechagodzilla be more similar to Kiryu, and you could maybe have the older Dagon skeleton inside of Mechagodzilla instead of Ghidorah. I would really like to see like the contrast between obviously an evil Mechagodzilla and then the more heroic Mechagodzilla. You could have quite an emotional moment where maybe Godzilla recognised that this Mechagodzilla is actually like, or was a member of his kind. But that's just my idea. Let me know what you think in the comments. I'd also really like to see Mogira. Even though Mogira was fucking weak and basically useless in Godzilla vs. SpaceGodzilla, Mogira definitely still has a really good design, and I would like to see Mogira again in some capacity. Obviously, you know, just make him stronger and actually stand the chance. And finally, I really want to see the King of the Monsters Titans. Like, Legendary, come on, please. We haven't seen them, besides from obviously Scylla, on the big screen since King of the Monsters. I'm especially talking about Behemoth mainly. Like, please, can we just have Behemoth back? We need Behemoth. The world needs him. I know Godzilla Dominion shows how Behemoth isn't the strongest titan at all in the Monsterverse, as he basically got one-shotted by Amulek, but I don't care. Behemoth is just such a cool titan and I want to see him back. Please. I'd also like to see the 17 and counting titans that we haven't actually seen on screen or in a comic yet. And I mean, obviously, you know, we need a Doug cameo in this film. If there's no Doug cameo, I'm walking out of the fucking cinema. I don't care. Anyway, now that I've talked about who I think Godzilla and Kong's allies in the film should be, I think now I'm going to be talking about the final thing I'm going to discuss on this video, and that's what the tone and the setting of the film's going to be. Starting with the tone of the film, I know a lot of people want the more serious, gritty kind of tone that, say, Godzilla 2014 had, as one of the main criticisms of The New Empire was just how goofy that film was. Which, even though I like The New Empire very much, it's definitely one of my favourite films in the Monsterverse, I do understand why people aren't a fan of it, especially with the tone, but personally I'm not one of them. I think you can have Godzilla in a more serious tone and a more goofy tone. I mean, look at the Showa era, for example. But yeah, I do hope that this film has more of a serious tone. Maybe not 2014 -1 levels of serious, something more along the lines of King of the Monsters. That film did still take itself seriously, but it also still had a lot of goofy sci-fi elements in it. I do definitely think you can have a movie that has all of the tech and sci-fi and fantasy elements from The New Empire, but is also still a serious kaiju film. I think a way on how you can do this is show the destruction and the damage that these monsters are causing. One of my biggest nitpicks of Godzilla vs. Kong and The New Empire is how they don't show the loss of human life and the mass devastation that these kaiju are causing. Like with a film like 2014 where, yeah, it still has awesome monster fights, but it also still shows the effects of these titans fighting each other. While The New Empire just glosses over it and just focuses on the monsters fighting, which isn't a bad thing, but I think for your film to have more emotional weight, I think it should focus on the people being affected by these titans fighting each other, along with the monsters beating the shit out of each other, obviously. Like, if you think about it, in The New Empire, when Scar King and Shimo attacked Rio, no one had time to evacuate, so the amount of casualties that would have happened during that fight are unimaginable. But yet, the movie just glosses over it. Next, I'll be talking about the setting of the film, particularly where, like, the fights will take place, like the final battle and all that stuff. I think it would be cool to have the final battle be in Tokyo, since we haven't seen the MonsterVerse Godzilla in Tokyo yet, so I definitely do think that's a place he should go. Along with Tokyo, I think New York would be cool, since I think it would be interesting to see Godzilla and most definitely Kong in New York. If they do New York, they definitely have to have Kong climb up the Empire State Building, because, I mean, why the fuck wouldn't you? Along with Tokyo and New York, I think it would be cool to see them fight in somewhere like Dubai or Sydney. Also places in Europe like Barcelona, Paris. I think it'd be cool to see Titans fight in other environments. Places like Niagara Falls, the Himalayas, hell, even like on Mount Fuji would be cool. You could maybe have the final battle start on Mount Fuji and then later during the fight go into Tokyo. So overall, I want to have more of a dark, serious tone in this film, and I also want to see Godzilla and the Titans go to different places in the world. So yeah, that was my pitch / wish list of GXK Supernova. Let me know what you lot thought of it. You know, did you like my ideas? Did you not like them? Also, let me know what you think should happen in the film. I don't know, I'm interested in other people's ideas of what they think. By the way, sorry for the lack of consistency in uploads recently. This video took a very long time to make. Some of the reasons why it took so long was I've been on holiday twice, and also I'm back at college now, so yeah, if there's any like gap between uploads, then that's why. So with that being said, thanks for watching. Leave a like and subscribe if you want, and yeah, in a bit.
Fearsome Godzilla has evolved.